Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Justin Nelson, who is a real estate agent from sphererocket.com, and he is going to be talking to us about using virtual assistants in your real estate business so that way you can leverage your life in your business and you can overcome those pitfalls of success and get your time back and get your organization back and all those fun things. So, Justin, excited to jump in and glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, man. It's another great Tuesday or whatever day it is in this crazy fast-paced world. So I appreciate you having me on.
Right. It's like almost like they need to invent another couple of days in the week just to fit everything else in. And
Absolutely.
and I love the niche that you're in. And at some point, somehow I signed up for your list and I was getting on it and kind of just learning what you're all about. This was maybe a year or two ago. So It's kind of one of those synchronicity things. And I love this concept because you're in an interesting overlap, right? When people talk about virtual assistants and getting your time back, sometimes it's all vague and choose your own adventure. And then with the real estate business, you always hear about how it seems glamorous jumping in, but then the next thing you know, you're getting out of bed at 3 a.m. and unclogging toilets. And so it seems like you have a great solution for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I got started in the real estate realm when I was 16 years old and, was the typical real estate agent from about 18 to 23. And long story short, I saw, the average real estate agent is 58 years old in the United States. Average investor is north of 58 years old. And we just really saw, the average real estate agent and real estate business owner, they had the same thing. They were in their 60s, 70s, driving around, showing buyers, doing property management. And it's because they had built no teams. It was one of the only industries when I looked around, I was like, why does my dentist have a team? Why does McDonald's have a team? Why do all these businesses have teams? Yet in real estate, the team aspect of having an assistant, you really only saw the top 5% of producers have that mindset. And so that's kind of where I got my start, and ultimately why I jumped kind of out of real estate in the practical day-to-day into the virtual assistant business in terms of now giving them to real estate agents. We also have several thousand clients that aren't in real estate too. But that's kind of how I got started. Is I was just like, wait, my dentist will retire one day because he's built a team, he's built an office, a book of business. But all of my colleagues, they're still showing homes at 60, 70, 80 years old, and they have no leverage.
Well, that's excellent foresight on your part. And I can't remember who said it, but there's someone who said something like, if you just work a job and that's it, then you'll basically work until you die. And then you hear about these people that sell companies, and how the heck will you sell a company if it depends on you, or if it's not turnkey? And so in our discussion here, it seems obvious, but if you're in the thick of it, if you're going through that day to day as a real estate agent, then it's easy to just kind of not know what needs to be done. So when it comes to this whole idea of virtual assistants for real estate, what is that exactly? What are the tasks? Because what comes to mind is, we've all lived in not a good apartment building to live, right? We've all lived where they ignore us, or they don't do maintenance, or there's some kind of problem with the rent check. And so what does it mean to have this team and to have these virtual assistants kind of manage real estate for us?
Yeah, so I'll kind of take it in two perspectives. So if we back out of real estate a little bit and look at just a general perspective of any business, and real estate will be the one I refer to, if you take it back, every business runs the same, right? You obviously are going to have some type of lead generation. You could be McDonald's, you could be a dentist, you could be an apartment complex, right? You have to bring customers in the door. Now, obviously, one of the most popular ways to do that nowadays is social media, right? However, when we look back at the average business owner, sure, I work with a lot of business owners that are younger, but the stats still show the average business owner is in their 40s plus, right? That's just the truth of the facts. And so when you have that single mindset, that solo business mindset, you do it all yourself, and then you roll it into, well, the lead generation method of today is social media and different things along those lines. Well, that's where virtual assistants kind of got their introduction into the entrepreneur space as well. Who can make my Facebook post for me? Who can make my Instagram post? Who can manage my email list? So people like you get on it. And, even though I may not have the time to write emails each week, it keeps my name in front of you repetitively. And those are my virtual assistants writing it, right? So, for an example, for an apartment complex, if you're trying to rent out an apartment complex to people that need to lease, right? There's no reason we can't be doing social media posts, right? If you look up your average apartment complex, They're not making social media posts. They're not making any of those things. But then that kind of spirals down, right? So if you look at businesses that aren't run well, now you get your customers in the door. They go under contract, they sign a lease, they buy your hamburger. Well, now it's the servicing, right? And if you're still kind of a small shop and you don't have extra hands, well, that's kind of what you were talking about, the places that ignore you. Like, I'll give you a great example of where I really rose to changing businesses is when I said something as simple as this. You have someone come in, lease an apartment from you. Why don't we have a virtual assistant call them once a month, every month for their entire tenure of being a tenant of yours? And the business owner's like, oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I'll just do that myself, or they don't need calls. But as soon as we put a virtual assistant in and we had them call the homeowner once a month, the homeowners were happy, or leasers, should I say, and this goes for anything, right? The people leasing apartments were happier. They also brought to your attention problems ahead of time. They're like, oh, and by the way, something's broken, right? So now you're getting ahead of things. And not only that, you're also getting insight into, a lot of times we get, well, hey, I just let you know I might not make my next payment, and some things like that. So that customer service really made for an all-around greater experience. And that was just from putting a virtual assistant that costs $3-4 an hour, right? If you have an apartment complex of 1,000 apartments, are you really going to call all 1,000 people each month? No, but it might take a virtual assistant at $4 an hour, 20-30 hours to do so. But now you just spent $100 to call every single one of your tenants. Now you're increasing the number of referrals, you're increasing the number of satisfied customers, and just overall, building a better community. And just to be clear, that goes for any business, right? You can take that same thing to a dentist. When's the last time your dentist called you every 3 months, right? Sometimes we get some text or emails. When's the last time your insurance agent called you monthly just to say thank you for being a client of theirs, right? So that's really where I got my introduction to the VA world, was just servicing our customers.
I love it. And those are two incredible ideas. This consistency as far as social media to your prospects, and this once a month phone call to your buyers. And I mean, again, like the other ideas before, it seems so simple, right? It seems so obvious, but it's so simple that most of us don't do it. And you're making me think of a couple of things. One is that I was playing around like many business owners do, right? You do a little bit and then you just get distracted with something else. There's no recurringness. I don't know what the grammatically correct term is, but like I had a webinar coming up and I hired someone to make some phone calls, and it worked out pretty well. But then I need to get that person back on the phone just to repeatedly talk to those customers to see how things are going. And you're also making me think of, there was a time when I was 12 years old. We went to Disneyland and we stayed at just some low price motel. Like a Motel 6 wasn't bad. It was just kind of cheap and low budget. Yep. And I remember that we got settled in and the phone rang. And I'm like, oh my gosh, when do you ever get settled in just like a motel, even like a nice hotel, right? When you get settled in and the phone rings and they just said, hey, we just wanted to make sure you got settled in your room and wanted to see if you need anything. And we didn't need anything, but I was so blown away. And even 30 plus years later, I'm like, I still think about just that simple phone call settling in the motel room. So that's wonderful. And so what would you say to like the pessimist, right? If someone says, oh, well, I don't want to call my tenants because they'll alert me to all these problems and it'll cost me all this time and money. What do you say to someone who maybe is negative about this and thinks that talking to their tenants will like open up Pandora's box?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where what I kind of call it the rule of consistency. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, right? So when you increase the amount of communication, it just reveals these problems ahead of time, right? And then one of the fears, and this is something you just have to dive into, is you're going to realize 99% of the calls are not opening Pandora's box, right? People aren't going to answer sometimes, but they're going to feel well connected to you, right? Sometimes people are just going to say, yeah, everything's going great, right? And sure, sometimes you're going to open Pandora's box to some of the crazies or some of the anything. But the other thing too is the reason why I like to leverage it to an assistant or a virtual assistant in this case is because they get to deal with Pandora's box a little bit. A lot of times as business owners, if I used to make those calls, you're right. I would call a leaser or a tenant, or, maybe I ran a different company and I was calling one of the customers for that. And you're right. They would derail my day, right? They would tell us how bad it was, how upset they were. And it would kind of mentally just kind of maybe mess me up, even if we hadn't done anything wrong. But with a virtual assistant, what I love about them doing it is it's their job, right? They get numb to it. They love it. And now they're just passing me notes, right? If they call a tenant, that's always the crazy tenant. Well, sure, I maybe might not put as much thought, into the notes that I got from that tenant, and I can choose to either, do something about it or not do something about it. So personally, I love that as well, because now it kind of separates me a little bit from it, while at the same time still providing more customer service than 99% of other businesses.
Right. And you were saying a few minutes ago that there's what the average businesses do, all right, or the average kind of real estate business where, for example, they don't post on social media. And so you do some of these above average things. And I like what you said there, where with you being removed from the business, and then your workers are removed from the business a little bit as well. So then it kind of works out. Like if it was you as the owner directly calling and the tenant was mad or yelling, they're yelling at you. But then now if the tenant is yelling, you still get the message, but then they're not yelling at the worker. They're just passing the message along. So it seems like there's that kind of separation of powers there to make it easier. And so this is a wonderful thing to think about. And would you say, how much would you say is this whole like making the leap to a VA? How much of it is like the work and how much of it is the mental game? Because it seems like even some of these things we're talking about here is you're saying like, you just need to jump in and try it and take the risk and see what happens. And so like, do people get holed up on this like because of the mental block or the cost, or like why don't more people take action on this?
Yeah, so over the last 3 years, the mental block's kind of gone away with the world of Zoom, right? So virtual assistants have been around in the corporate world for 20 years. Like where a big company like Uber or Lyft or IBM or Google sends all of their work to India, all of their work to the Philippines. And so over the last 20 years, sometimes people in any country across America, across Europe, we can sometimes get a bad taste in our mouth, because when we call a customer service desk for Google or somewhere big, you might get someone in a foreign country and it's hard to understand them, and there might be some barrier there and you might get frustrated. And so a lot of times people that have never used a virtual assistant, they just associate virtual assistants with a foreign worker that works for a big corporation and that had language barriers and caused them pain, right? But the reality is a lot of these big corporations, they're hiring the cheapest of the cheapest talent, right? They're just trying to get a body in the space to, just be able to fulfill a need. Where when you really dig in, virtual assistants over the last 3 years, ever since COVID, honestly, me and you, I don't even know how many miles you are away from me, right? And if I had to hire you, I don't know what it would cost per hour, but I know it's a lot more than $3 or $4 an hour. And so the world has really shortened its gap, where I could invite my virtual assistant to jump on here and there's no more gap, right? There's no more of that thought of, well, they have to be in the office. I can't see them. I can't watch them. I can't, talk to my employees. And so like for me, if I have my background here off, like I have 3 or 4 computer screens up, and each screen is a different department. I have my marketing department, my social media department, I have my lead generation department, and it's all of my virtual assistants sitting in a Zoom room. So I would say what the mental block is still there for a lot of people, but the way that Zoom has been accepted, especially by older generations, our virtual assistants feel closer to us than ever. So
I love it. You're so right that you don't know what the distance is anymore between someone else, and it's more accepted to be connected. Things don't take days or weeks like they used to. And so as far as the tasks that these VAs do, like, is there like a way to get our heads wrapped around it? Is there like a breakdown? Is there a hierarchy? Are there buckets? Like you mentioned things like lead generation or customer support. And I've seen some of these real estate guys with like these big complex spreadsheets, right? Like some saying like they deal with like the maintenance person on a recurring basis. And so how do you even like begin to think about this huge spiderweb mess?
Yeah, so I always tell people if you're truly good at your business, I'm going to use a dentist again as an example, just because it's a little bit easier than real estate. But if you're the dentist, you have to map out the entire what I call the client's journey. So your client's journey starts at home. So if our client's sitting at home and we have to get their attention, maybe I run Facebook ads, maybe I run mailers, maybe I have to throw events, for lead gen, maybe I have to call randomly people. Maybe I have to do some BNI networking, whatever that is. So that's like bucket one. That's lead gen. My business has got to be lead gen based. And so now I start to look at what in that bucket can I do? And then what in the bucket can I have someone else do? So for example, maybe I want to call everybody within a mile of my office and tell them I'm giving them a free teeth cleaning. Okay, well, cool. Maybe I can have a virtual assistant do that one because they're just repetitively dropping the same message. And maybe I'll go to BNI. Maybe I'll go to the networking event. So now what we have is we have two people with 40 hours each in their week going out at the same time and now getting 80 hours of lead gen done versus if it was just me, maybe I could only spend 20 at, BNI, 20 at calling homeowners. So now it's kind of like an Elon Musk method. The reason why he moves so fast is he just has more people than a lot of us, right? It's not that he's smarter. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy, but he's got more people, more manpower, more hours. And so I look at bucket number one as lead gen, right? So it can be anything from cold calling, networking, running ads, cold DMing people, whatever the strategy is. That's kind of bucket number one. And then you go into, obviously, you get the customers in the door, or you still have to convert them, right? So bucket number two is, well, who's going to open the door for our clients when they come to our dentist office? Okay, well, maybe that one has to be an in-person job, right? Maybe a virtual assistant can't do that one. But can our virtual assistant send the paperwork, for our clients ahead of time? Can they email all of the clients the pre-registration paperwork so when they walk in the door, my client has a better experience and doesn't have to grab a clipboard and sit there for 15 minutes more? And so those are the types of things. And then you get into the back office, right? Can my virtual assistant then, after a client leaves, send them a follow-up schedule? Can my virtual assistant call them to get their next appointment scheduled if they didn't do it? And so, I always say the businesses has a few buckets: lead generation, conversion of your sales, client, servicing during the process, and then ultimately client retention, getting that client back over and over again. And so one of the best ways, and maybe I can give something free for you guys that's got no registration or anything. If you guys just go to sphererocketfiles.com, we have the job descriptions listed for over 30 different job positions that even if you never became a client of ours or never had to use us, you can use all those job descriptions. And it's got probably about 300 tasks listed out there that we normally see virtual assistants do.
Wonderful. And I love the way that you think here. It's kind of like creative and fun. And so the way I'm sorting it in my head is almost like there's like past, present, and future, right? There's the past, which is the past part of the story, which is how to get your prospects into customers, into tenants, and then how to take care of them. And then the future is then how to then nurture them, make sure that they stay happy tenants and they stay satisfied. And so I like how your kind of thought process here is you figure out this customer journey story. And then that way you're not just saying like, oh, I forgot about this. And that way it's not just a bunch of just scattered bullet points. You're saying what journey, what path are they taking? And then based on that, you then sort it into what needs to be me doing it. And then what is more of like a repetitive, clerical, low per hour task that then can be handed off to someone else. And that makes it just easier to figure it out, right? Because many times it's kind of daunting to say like I have to tack all these things onto my business, but you're saying, well, your customers are already going on the path, and the path could be a little bit better. Like the road is currently a gravel road, but it could be a paved road with guardrails and traffic lights, and it could be just fixed up a little bit better. And then to make that happen, you have your team help with some of these things. And I also like how your kind of mindset on time management is you're saying, well, don't look at it as all this chaos you're adding or all these expenses you're adding. Look at it as all the labor that is being increased. Right now, you can only do 40 hours. Now I get to 80 hours and beyond that. So that's wonderful to think about. And so that the URL one more time is sphererocketfiles.com. Is that right?
Yep. Sphererocketfiles.com, or you can also go to higherleverage.com, and then the files are both on those as well. So you hit it spot on. And the crazy thing, man, is you can apply this to just anything as simple as this. Like, I know you have an awesome podcast and you have tons of guests. I go on a ton of podcasts. I have my own. But like, one of the things I started doing recently is I started to go on to hundreds of podcasts a year. Is after this, my virtual assistant's going to email you. They're going to say, hey, Robert, what's your address? We have a gift to send you. And now my virtual assistant's going to send you between 12 and 24 gifts a year in the mail, right? They could be handwritten letters with Starbucks cards. And just for us, like, that's just a small example of how, like, for some people, a podcast may not be a business, but like for me, like, I just want to make sure that you and I never forget about each other, right? Over the next few years, because maybe I have someone I can refer over to you, right? To be a podcast guest or into your business world. And maybe you refer someone over to me. And so just something as simple as getting your address is huge. Because if I jump off this call and go into the next thing, I'm just like you, back-to-back schedules all day, right? Where now if I have a VA, they can focus on us nurturing a relationship for cents on the dollar.
Right. We're on each other's lists. And many times it's easy to discount this idea of a list as like, oh, I'm sending an email blast with an unsubscribe link on the bottom, but there's different sorts of tiers, right? We can be each other's social media buddies and like each other's posts, or refer each other, or just send that quick message. There's all kinds of different kind of levels to that kind of building the list. And as much as real estate people have sort of this reputation as being good with list building and being good with follow-up, man, I think all the time about the house I'm living in. I bought it 15 years ago, and the person that sold me the house, I remember her first name, but not her last name. I've never heard anything from her since. And then I don't know, like, what the term is for real estate, but like, someone else was listing this address, and then my realtor kind of like went and made it work. But the person that was like listing, I think I've gotten maybe like 4 letters in the mail over the past 15 years, and it was just some sent to everyone, nothing personalized. And I think, like, man, like, if these people had just dialed in their marketing like a little better, then it would have made quite a difference with me as a prospect. So that's like interesting to think about. Like, there's just things that we could always all do just like a little bit better. And when we improve the system, then we can revisit it months later and improve it again, which is just, it goes up, we're uphill from there. And so as we're winding down our conversation here, Justin, like, what am I not asking you? Is there something that we're leaving out that you think is just really important for your future prospects to know?
I mean, I think the biggest thing I tell people is, if you're ever considering hiring leverage, right? If you've never done it before, virtual assistants are a great way to start, right? Because they're usually only a few dollars an hour. So you get to sometimes learn some of your leadership, your flaws, but also the pros to your leadership style. I've been in leadership since I was like 18 years old, and virtual assistants were amazing because now I'm making leadership mistakes on $3, $4, $5 an hour. And I didn't hire a $50 an hour personal assistant that I messed up on, right? In terms of doing the wrong task or getting systems in place. So, that's what I usually tell people is like, hey, take a risk on yourself, right? Get some help. No one wants to be a spouse to someone that works 90 hours a week. No one wants to be a child of a parent working 90 hours a week. And the only way we can a lot of times get rid of that is hiring help. So whether it's in-person assistants and you never need a virtual assistant, that is totally cool too. Like, if that's all you hear is you need leverage and you don't need a VA, that's awesome. Just find a way to get more leverage in your life. I just happen to specialize in the VA world. But sometimes VAs can only go so far too, right? In certain things. If my virtual assistant can't go to the grocery store for me and buy my groceries, now they can Instacart something for me, right? So there's a lot of ways to be really creative, like we've said. But that's probably the biggest thing is, like, just dive in, like, be ready to make mistakes, but get some leverage, because it can not only make you more money, but give you more time back.
I love it. And how optimistic of you to just dive in and experiment and make those low risk mistakes, because you're only making it on a $3 or $4 hour employee, and the success to that might not be a straight line, but it might also expose some of the pre-existing sort of dry rot in your business already, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might be organized, or you might have bad leadership. You don't even know how bad it is until you try to hand it off to someone, and that way you can get the problem fixed, and you can enjoy the finite time you have left in your life with your family and get this leverage. And so if someone wants to take action on some of this, what are those URLs again? What's the call to action?
Yeah, so the best one, the one that's easiest, is just hireleverage.com, HIRE. So hireleverage.com. It's got the files on there, it's got job descriptions. And I'll tell you, even if someone never becomes a client of mine, never needs a VA, just go on there and take all the documents off there, and that alone will give you a really good foundation. Even if you're hiring in-person assistants, in-person help, go download all the files. Now, of course, if you're like, I have no clue what to do, I need some help, Justin, sure, schedule a call with us. I'm more than happy to, help you with the VAs, give you some advice, and, see if it makes sense for you to become a client of mine. But at the end of the day, I just want people to have leverage, right? I've been there. I've made $1 million in a year working 90 hours a week, and trust me, it's not worth it if you don't have leverage in your business.
I love it. I agree with you completely. And so I love that play on words, HIRE leverage.com. Go there right now and get those materials. And as we wrap up our conversation here, Justin, I think it's always fun to cap things off with like a favorite quote, moral, or lesson. So does anything come to mind for you as far as a favorite quote, moral, or lesson that jumps out of your head?
Yeah, so I think my favorite quote, and this comes from my business coach, Dustin Runny, and he says, there's no such things as business problems, just personal problems that affect your business. And so what that means is like, if you're like, I'm scared to be a leader, well, that's not really a business problem. That's a problem inside of you that you have to get fixed in order to exceed your business, right? Or I'm scared of risk. I'm scared of paying $5 an hour for an assistant because it might take away money from my family. Well, again, that's an inside personal problem of, hey, a business has to be built this way. And so that was one of my favorites, is there's no such thing as business problems, just personal problems that affect the business, which is why some of the best business entrepreneurs in the world have therapists, right? They fix their identity issues. They fix a lot of the mental issues, because I still have them to this day, right? Blocks, things from our childhood. And if you can free from those, you're going to make a lot more money when you're more confident in the decisions you're making.
That is spooky to think about. You're so right that your business is an expression of your personality, for better or for worse. And so if you know that you have things to work on, if you know that you could be better, then the very next step for you is to go to hireleverage.com. We'll see you there. And thank you very much, Justin, for being on here and being generous with your information and your time. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.